Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I never believed in ghosts. At least, not until that night at an empty WWE arena. It was 2015, the kind of night that hangs in your memory like a bad dream, stitched together with sweat, exhaustion, and the strange silence of an arena long after the crowd has gone home. I had just wrapped up a dark match after SmackDown, my body aching in all the usual places. Most of the crew had left, and I was alone in the locker room, lacing up my boots, when I heard it, a deep, wheezing breath right behind me. I froze. The air turned ice cold. Not the kind of cold you get from bad insulation or an overworked AC unit. No, this was something else. Something that crawled into your skin and stayed there. My fingers stopped mid-loop around my laces. I wasn't alone. I didn't move. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I could hear my father's voice from when I was a kid, warning me about strange things. If you ever feel something behind you, don't turn around. It wants you to, but the thing about fear, it's a funny, stupid thing. It makes you curious. Slowly, I lifted my head, my eyes shifting toward the mirror in front of me. That's when I saw it. A tall, shadowy figure stood behind me, hunched over slightly, as if its spine had been broken in 3 places. It wore what looked like a referee's shirt, but the stripes were faded, almost dripping into the fabric like ink. Its face, God, its face. I couldn't make out the features. It was like staring at a TV screen that had lost its signal, all static and distortion. And then it moved, not like a person. It didn't shift or turn. It flickered. 1 second it was behind me, the next it was closer. The air in the room thickened, pressing against my chest. I wanted to breathe, to scream, but I was locked in place. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. I spun around so fast my chair nearly toppled over. Nothing. The locker room was empty. I let out a shaky breath and grabbed my bag, moving faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't care about checking my locker, didn't care if I left something behind. I just needed to get out. The hallway outside was dim, a few overhead lights buzzing weakly, casting long shadows against the walls. My boots thudded against the concrete floor as I walked, my breath still uneven. Then, just as I reached the exit, I nearly crashed into someone. Whoa, slow down, kid. It was one of the older referees, Rick O'Connor, a guy who had been with WWE for decades. "You okay?" he asked, eyes narrowing as he took in my pale face. I hesitated. What was I supposed to say? Hey, I just saw a dead guy in the locker room. But something in his expression told me he already knew. So I told him, every word. He didn't react at first, just listened. And when I was done, he let out a slow breath, nodding like he had heard it all before. "You just saw him," he muttered. I frowned. Saw who? Rick rubbed his jaw, glancing down the hallway as if checking for something or someone. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "The ref who never left." A chill ran down my spine. He glanced at me, eyes dark and serious. Years ago, before WWE bought this building, it was an indie wrestling venue. They ran shows here all the time. One night, Back in the early 90s, a referee collapsed mid-match. Heart attack. Died before they even got him to the hospital. The hallway suddenly felt smaller, tighter. I swallowed. What does that have to do with what I saw? Rick sighed. They say his spirit never left the ring. He's been seen a handful of times over the years. Always the same, standing in the locker room, watching. My stomach turned. Watching what? Rick gave me a look that I still think about to this day. Watching us. I never stayed late in that arena again. Even now, when I wrestle, I sometimes get that same feeling. The one that makes your skin prickle and your heart pick up speed. And every time I look in a mirror, a part of me braces for what I might see standing behind me. Story 2. Winning the title was supposed to be the greatest moment of my career. I had spent years clawing my way up the ranks, taking brutal bumps in indie circuits, wrestling in dingy gymnasiums where the crowds were more interested in their nachos than the matches. But now, I was here, on the grand stage of WWE, holding gold above my head as the crowd roared. My hands shook as I gripped the belt for the first time. It was heavier than I expected, the cool leather pressing against my palm, the metal plates catching the overhead lights, a symbol of everything I had sacrificed. But when I pressed my fingers against the center plate, a shiver crawled up my spine, like I had just touched something dead. I shook off the feeling. Maybe it was just adrenaline, the exhaustion of a grueling match messing with my senses. I should have known better. That night, I took the belt home, placing it proudly on my dresser, right next to an old picture of my father, the man who introduced me to wrestling. I was too wired to sleep, still replaying the match in my head, every near fall, every chant, every second of that final pinfall. I finally drifted off sometime after 2 a.m., and then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., I woke up. It was the sound that did it, a soft, rustling noise like fabric dragging across the hardwood floor. For a moment, I thought it was just the air conditioning kicking in, but then I turned my head and saw it. The championship belt, no longer on the dresser. Instead, it lay face down in the middle of my room. I sat up, my breath caught in my throat. Had I knocked it over in my sleep? That didn't make sense. It had been placed securely, far from the edge. The room was still. The only sound was the faint hum of the street lamp outside. I got up, picked up the belt, and placed it back on the dresser. The metal felt colder than before. I told myself it was nothing. I should have known better. The next night, it happened again, and the night after that. Every single time, I would wake up at 3:07 a.m., a cold sweat clinging to my skin, a strange weight pressing down on my chest, only to find the belt lying in the middle of my room, face down. Then, the nightmares began. I dreamt of a man screaming, his face blurred, his body thrashing as he clutched a championship belt, the exact same belt I now own. I couldn't see what was dragging him down, only that he was fighting against something unseen, his fingers digging into the leather, his cries muffled as darkness swallowed him whole. I woke up gasping, my bed sheets tangled around me like restraints. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just stress. The pressure of being a champion, of living up to expectations. But deep down I knew something was wrong with that belt. The breaking point came a week later. I had just finished a house show in Tennessee, my body sore from the match. I crashed in my hotel room, placing the belt on the desk near the window. I wasn't going to let some stupid dream get in my head. That night, I didn't wake up at 3:07 a.m. Instead, I woke up to the feeling of something pressing down on my chest. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My arms were pinned to my sides, my body locked in place, as if an invisible weight was crushing me. And then I saw it. The belt was hovering above me, not lying on the floor, not on the desk, hanging in midair. A shadowy hand, thin, skeletal fingers wrapped in decayed flesh, was gripping the leather strap. My body screamed to move, but I was frozen, trapped beneath an unseen force. The hand tightened around the belt, and then a voice, raspy, barely a whisper, breathed into my ear. "This isn't yours." The belt slammed down on my chest. I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat, my body shaking. The belt was back on the desk. The air smelled stale, like something ancient had just been in the room. I grabbed the belt and stuffed it in my bag. I didn't care about the damn storyline anymore. I wanted it gone. The next day, I found an old-timer in the locker room, one of those grizzled veterans who had seen it all. I told him everything. The belt moving, the nightmares, the thing in my hotel room. His face went pale. "That belt," he muttered, "came from a guy who died in the ring." I felt my stomach twist. "Oh?" I asked. The old man hesitated, then said the name. I knew it. Everyone in the business did. He was a legend, a mid-carder from the early 2000s who had collapsed in the ring, clutching his championship belt, the same belt I now had. I stared at the title resting on the bench beside me. For the first time, I didn't feel pride, didn't feel like a champion. I felt like I was holding a gravestone. I tried to get rid of it. I begged the writers to change the storyline, but the belt was part of the show. It wasn't mine to throw away. So instead, I stopped keeping it near me. I left it outside my bedroom, in another part of the house. The nightmares stopped. The whispers faded. But sometimes when I pass by it, I swear, I can hear something. A faint, ragged breath. A voice, distant, waiting. "This isn't yours." Story 3. I've worked in the wrestling business for over a decade, but nothing has ever rattled me like the night I carried The Undertaker's gear. It was 2018, and he was making one of his rare appearances. The entire locker room buzzed with nervous excitement. Even the veterans seemed to stand a little straighter when he walked through the hallways. There was just something about the guy, a presence. Not just his size, though he was a mountain of a man, but the way he carried himself, the way he could make an entire arena go dead silent with just a single look. I had seen him wrestle before. I had watched him rise from the dead 1,000 times, but that was just a gimmick, a show, a carefully crafted illusion. Or so I thought. That night, after his segment, I was asked to take his coat and hat back to his locker room. A simple task, one I'd done plenty of times for other superstars. I grabbed the thick black trench coat, draped it over my arm, and balanced the iconic wide-brimmed hat on top. From the moment I stepped into the hallway, something felt off. The air was different, thicker, like I had walked into a room where someone had been smoking cigars for hours. Except there was no smell, just a weight, I ignored it. I had a job to do. As I walked, I heard it footsteps. Not mine. I stopped. The sound stopped. I turned around, expecting to see another crew member behind me, but the hallway was empty. Just a long stretch of dim, flickering lights and old posters of past WrestleManias taped to the walls. Okay, I told myself. Maybe it was just the echo of my own steps. I started walking again. The footsteps started again, too. I walked faster. The steps behind me quickened. I turned another corner, my heart pounding now, gripping the coat a little tighter. The locker room was just ahead, just a few more steps. I was moving fast now, practically jogging. The footsteps behind me weren't echoes anymore. They were heavier. They were closer. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. I reached the locker room door, shoved it open, and hurried inside. The room was empty. Just a long wooden bench, a mirror, and a single row of lockers. No windows. No one else inside. I set the coat and hat down on the bench, exhaling hard. Then the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. My breath caught in my throat. I was alone, but I wasn't. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath came out in a cloud. The walls groaned like old wood settling. And then I heard it. A voice. Deep, gravelly. So close it felt like someone was standing just inches behind me. He's here. I don't remember opening the door. I don't remember running. I just remember bursting out of that locker room, breathless, my skin crawling with something I can only describe as wrong. I didn't stop running until I reached the main backstage area. I must have looked pale as hell because one of the veteran crew members took one look at me and asked what happened. I told him. He didn't laugh, didn't call me crazy. He just nodded slowly and said, "Taker's always had a guest." I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't explain. He just told me to never be alone in Taker's locker room again. I never was.